Dark Souls, without a doubt, is one of the most tightly designed series of this entire generation. Its level designs and boss progression being unmatched and endlessly enticing. And in today's episode, we're going to be discussing the game design techniques that actually make this series so addictive. And because I'm going to be analysing all 3 titles in the trilogy, I've split these into 2 distinct episodes, and they're going to be heavy. So spoiler warning from this point onwards, guys, and welcome to the Anatomy of Dark Souls Part 1. So, because we're going to be analysing this series as a whole rather than discussing the individual micro designs like in my episodes on Bloodborne and Sekiro, we instead need to focus on the macro. What are these games attempting to do? What is the tone and intent of their design decisions? Well, in general, Dark Souls worlds are designed in a way that feels apathetic to the player, making them feel small in a world that doesn't particularly care for their existence. If you don't have what it takes to complete your quest, someone else will. These games are incredibly intimidating when you first play them, because at their core, they're horror games. No, not like that, mate. Not horror in genre, but in design technique. Mechanical fear instead of narrative fear. All aspects of their design, from their levels, bosses, and progression, are all designed to accentuate and come back to this central theme of fear. But first off, how has this influenced this series' level design? In all 3 games, you wake up in a world hostile and hungry, offered very little guidance and every single corner demanding your attention. And like we mentioned in the Anatomy of Bloodborne, a lot of people think that the level designs of these games can be confusing due to how non-linear they are. But this is a misconception. Well, yes, they're non-linear in the sense that the player is given a choice in what way they would like to progress, but these individual areas are almost completely linear, moving in straight lines from A to B, from bonfire to boss. But FromSoft want the player to feel lost in a big, unforgiving world. But how do they make a player feel lost when the path forward is totally linear? Well, they do this by disguising that linearity with spiraling verticality. The player always travelling vertically in their climb or descent to their demise. And this spiralling on a surface level disguises the fact that the player is moving in a straight line, but this verticality also breeds engagement through vantage, planning, and false failure. But firstly, vantage. The verticality of these spirals allows for the player to look down on these levels via strategically placed vantage points, seeing signifiers of alternate paths and enemy placements, where they came from and where they need to go, always being framed from these vantage points. But the most important implementation of these vantage points is how it allows its players to plan. Most action RPGs simply consist of moving from room to room, tackling each threat as it is presented to you in that contained encounter. It's purely reactive gameplay, and don't get me wrong, Dark Souls does have this, but it's as much of a tactical RPG as it is an action one. Enemy packs and patrols are placed to be viewable from these vantage points to allow the player to plan their attacks, formulating ways to ambush and navigate to gain an advantage, which adds a completely new level of engagement and decision making on top of the moment-to-moment action gameplay. But how does allowing the player to plan their attacks connect to fear and apathy? Well, it gives the player a chance to feel as if they're mastering these levels, but then FromSoft just pull the fucking rug out from under them. An advantage to this spiraling descent into its levels is how it draws the player into high and narrow paths, where traps, ambushes, or simple failure will force them into a lower point of no return, trapped now in an unknown area, all of their plans now irrelevant, forcing them to ascend this same spiral again, which completely removes vantage and planning from the equation, allowing the player to build up this confidence and then ripping it away to rebalance this fear and tension that they're trying to build. But this is all false failure, because these points of no return usually spiral the player deeper into its levels, taking them closer to their goal rather than punishing them, giving the illusion of failure and punishment while it guides them closer to their goal, creating this manufactured Ludo narrative of being lost. But tension cannot exist without having a consequence for failure. The main point of failure in most games being death, and Dark Souls uses its innovative soul system to permanently incubate this fear of failure. Souls are a universal currency the player gains by killing enemies and bosses. They can then be used to level up, upgrade their weapons, or buy useful items. Literally everything. Everything in the game revolves around souls. But the player will drop all of their souls on death. And this harsh consequence for failure creates a constant sense of tension that builds as they spiral deeper and deeper into these levels. And as their healing items begin to dwindle, the amount of souls they've gained increases. Literally every aspect of its enemy and level design accentuates this tension. But once the player actually dies, this tension is released. The developers are now out of tricks to build this tension, as the player is no longer lost. They know the traps, ambushes, and level designs. So instead, From Software replaces it with a completely new way to build this tension. When the player dies, they drop their souls on the ground, giving them a second chance to retrieve what was once lost, but also a second chance for this tension. Because if they die again, the souls are lost forever. Instead of the tension of exploring an unknown area, you're now in a fight for survival as you make your way to your lost souls, knowing exactly what dangers are lurking around each corner to rob you. If you do die twice, the game is out of tricks now. There's no way to keep this tension alive and has to rebuild it from scratch. But this is now harder because the player knows this spiral. So ideally, on the first time through a level, they want to induce this tension but still have the player succeed. And this is where bonfires come in. We've spoken a lot about how From Software build tension in gameplay, but for that tension to be enjoyable, there has to be a moment of relief, and bonfires are that relief. A bonfire is a form of checkpoint, and once the player finds one, they will respawn at it once they die. And it's usually a long and arduous crawl to the next bonfire, and they're perfectly spaced out to allow for this tension to build up, and healing items running just low enough to encourage the need to search every corner for alternate paths to potential bonfires, while the player is at this vantage. And then, when they finally reach one, this release of tension is intoxicating. The developers in every single level are attempting to craft a tight cycle of tension and release, making the player feel an intense fear of failure through the soul system as they venture further from safety, so that the player can get a release of adrenaline and endorphins when they finally reach the next bonfire. Wait, okay, I know some of you might be writing in the comments right now,
But, Jay, you're not always going from bonfire to bonfire. Even in the example you gave earlier, you said that they were going from bonfire to boss. Are you dense, motherfucker?
well, firstly, yes, and yes, veteran players will know that you're not usually aiming for a new bonfire at the end of this spiral. It's usually a boss. So to create this tension and release, FromSoft have to loop the player back to the bonfire that they started at. I'm sure we're all used to seeing this. They use one-way shortcuts to loop the player back to the original bonfire, moving in a perfect loop. But just like with their spirals, they need to disguise this loop, and FromSoft does this by utilizing a form of illusion through Mobius loop level design. First off, what is a Mobius loop? Well, it's a little bit weird to wrap your head around, but you can make one at home with me while you watch. You'll just need a long strip of paper. You can make a Mobius loop or strip by affixing the ends of a rectangular strip together after giving one of the ends a 1/2 twist. This is now a Mobius loop. And this now has some really interesting properties. Firstly, it now only has one side. Instead of having two, the inside and outside faces of a loop, it has one, being able to travel around the entire object's surface continually without ever leaving. Yeah, it's trippy as fuck, but how does this apply to Dark Souls level design? From Software disguises their looping levels by utilizing the same kind of half twist, having a perfect loop but using a single point of verticality or false failure, spiraling the player deeper, confusing and distracting the player from realizing they're moving back to their original bonfire, allowing the player to travel along a singular path, never repeating or backtracking through an area. And this can be seen throughout the trilogy. Coupling these spiraled straight line and Mobius loop level designs, it allows for the world to feel sprawling and open. making the player feel lost and overwhelmed, but allows for the developers to have full control over exactly how they teach or challenge the player within each individual area. Wait, but that's not to say that these levels aren't complex, they are, but FromSoft do such a stellar job of subtly guiding the player throughout them. Here's a little tip for anyone if you ever get lost. Just look for candles. FromSoft fucking love candles and their diegetic lighting to guide you. Candles will nearly always guide you to the path of progression. I can just see it now. Hi, Mr. Miyazaki-san. We've done some playtesting and people seem to be getting lost a lot. What should we do?
あなたは何をするべきかしています。
All jokes aside, every single thing in this game's level design, the enemies, hazards, and the very walls themselves demand the player's attention. And this is how you breed engagement, and one of the many reasons why these games are so addictive. Confusing, but constantly compelling the player forward through spiraling and Mobius loop level design. Can you think of an example of this done really well in the trilogy, and maybe one where it's not done as well? Maybe where you got lost? Let me know down below. I would love to discuss these designs with you down there. So we've just seen how to control a player's progression through a non-linear world, but how do you control a player's power? How do you balance a non-linear RPG? Well, in part 2 of the Anatomy of Dark Souls, we're going to be covering how From Software balance player power to manage its difficulty, and whether their leveling system just might be useless. Well, yeah, I'll explain all of that, don't worry. Tune in next week to see that, and if you can't wait till then, make sure to check out the Anatomy of Bloodborne and Sekiro here on The Escapist. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode, and a huge shout out to The Escapist and my personal patrons for actually making these videos possible. And my personal channel is nearly at 5,000 subscribers, and when we hit it, I'm going to be doing a 24-hour charity stream where I attempt to make one of these anatomy episodes, which take me usually anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks. I'm going to try to make one in 24 hours for charity, so if that is something that interests you, please head over there. And finally, a huge shout out to Sam Elliott, who helped me make these wonderfully weird animations for the more complex topics in this video. He's a wonderful 3D modeler and 3D printer. If you would ever like anything made from scratch, please check him out. He's so talented. Thank you so much for the support, mate. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!